Hello there everyone and welcome back to another review. Today we are looking at Midas Touch by Julio Montoro and Sky Member Presents. Let's roll the intro and get straight into the review. Perfect, so you've stuck around with me, which means that you're interested in learning more about Midas Touch. Now, what is the effect? I wanted to put a performance video of me performing the effect full screen for you guys to actually have a feel of the performance. But it was performed by myself to no one in an empty room. So some of the movements and some of the things that I did kind of are a little bit too auditory and kind of feel weird as to putting it just as a cam, and I think it would kind of expose some of the workings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up here in the corner while I actually tell you guys what the effect is. So up here in the corner is going to be the performance. Now, essentially what the effect is, as you can see, you make someone, for the sake of my argument, you make someone choose a card, you then show them your prediction that it was a kind of a joke, this will be their card. You're then able to tell them to focus that the card is red, focus on the back, you pull it out of the image, you then ask them that's impressive, but wouldn't it be impressive if that actual card is their exact card that they chose? You then tell them that you know their card is this. You then tell them, of course, you know it is the Queen of Diamonds or whatever card is, and you show it to them. Now that's not only limited to cards. You can do this with my favorite application. I think of probably it's going to be most likely the only way I'm going to use this effect is produce the card box. I think that is probably the best way for issues I'm going to get into a little bit later. But I think if you produce the card box, you essentially negate all of the drawbacks of the effect. So I think that is definitely the best way to perform and the best way to do the effect. But we'll get into that later. Now, that is the effect and a small performance. Now, where do you buy this and how much does it cost? So you can buy this at any of your favorite magic stores or magic dealers. This costs $40 US and $59.99 Canadian dollars for my Canadian friends. So it is in the mid-range price for most effects nowadays. And what do you get when you purchase this? You get, of course, this envelope with the instructions inside. You also get a few things, a few gimmicks that I cannot show you. You also get a few things that you need to build your gimmick because there is some DIY involved. And then you also get some templates, such as this one for one effect. You get 3 pamphlets for the pamphlet effect. And then you get one erasable piece of special paper that you could erase what you write and keep on, making routines with this. So that's essentially what you get with the extra gimmicks as well as the extra things for the DIY. And of course you get an instructional video, which is really, really short, 20 minutes long. It is dubbed, it is not in English, so you're gonna have to read the subtitles as you move through. It is pretty self-explanatory and easy to understand, so that is that. Now let's talk about difficulty. Is this difficult to perform? Depends, honestly, because it depends a lot on what we're going to talk about, practicality and where to perform. It depends on your surrounding environment and the variation you want to perform. So I think this effect really, really depends on where you perform. So the difficulty of the effect itself, I would kind of split it in half. I would say that if you're performing anything that you want to give out at the end, it does take some practice. It does take some practice because, as you saw me do, from the moment I take out the card, I'm not able to show you that it's the Queen of Diamonds immediately. I have to place it on the back of the paper, kind of, do some fidgeting and then remove it and show. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. But that's why, like I said before, for me, I think the card box is the best because the card box, when you take it and you pull it out, you immediately take the cards out, you place the card box on the table, and you go into your routines. So the card box kind of, stays to the side, and I think that is probably the best use of the trick because it's easy. For the appearing card, it is, I would say, medium, And for the gum and for the Kit Kat, I would also say medium. It's not super hard, but it does take a teeny bit of practice. Not for the pulling out, that is incredibly easy. That I think anyone can do, even a novice. If I give you the gimmick already done and I tell you pull me out the Kit Kat, you will be able to do it in a matter of seconds. But if I tell you pull out the Kit Kat and then let me inspect it, then that is where the skill is gonna come. So you're gonna need some scripting, some routining, and some good audience management to get away with that. Now let's talk about practicality. Is this practical to perform? Now, yes and no. If you perform on stage or parlor, I think this is great. Like I feel things like this, or even the card or the card box are a great addition because you don't have to carry much. You just have to carry around a small flyer or a small sheet of paper with the object that you want to produce and your gimmick that is going to be attached to the paper itself. So essentially just the paper and the object you want to produce. So it doesn't take much carrying space. So I think for parlor and stage, this is good, but I think for close-up performances, this will be a bit harder to do because you're not going to start folding these up because these are actually quality, and if you fold them up, some creases may give away some things from the effects. You're not going to go folding these up. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind. So you can't really snuff this in your pocket and go do this, you know, at a bar or something like that. So if you're a street magician, a bar hopping magician, this is not something you're gonna be able to perform much. If you're a social media magician or you only do Zoom shows or do a lot of Zoom shows, this is perfect. This is perfect visual candy for Zoom and social media. But it does work in the real life too. As I said, it does work, but I do think it works better on stage and parlor rather than in actuality close-up table hopping performances. So for practicality, you do need to carry around the flyer and the object you want to perform. So practicality, I think, is heavily hindered on the fact of where you perform, which I kind of included. Normally I do 2 sections about where to perform in practicality, but I think these kind of mesh together. So to kind of summarize this is essentially practicality, you're gonna have to carry around a sheet of paper and keep it straight alongside with what you want to produce and the gimmick attached. So that's easy to carry around. But for performance-wise, you probably won't be able to do this much walk around table hopping because also the angles are 180. So when you're holding this, no one can be behind you. So no one can be physically behind the borders of the paper. No one can be behind that. So you have to keep that in mind. So I do think this is better for stage and parlor. And I do think that the routine with pulling out the card box is the best possibility that you can do, because imagine you're like this, you do boom, you take out your cards, you take out the cards and you go into your first routine. I do think that is pretty nice. So now let's talk about the last aspect before we go into the positives and negatives. It's the DIY. Is the DIY easy? Yes, it is. If I'm able to do it, you're able to do it. I suck at DIY. I never buy DIY projects. The moment I see DIY, I do not buy it. Even if it's a product I want, I do not buy it. But this promised to be 5 minutes or less with just, gluing or cutting, no threads, no nothing. So I said, okay, you know what? I do think it looks visual. I have a perfect idea for it in my show with the card box. Let me dive into it. So it's super easy. But the issue with the DIY is that you get enough material to only do one. So you can only do one gimmick. Now you can remove the material from one gimmick to another super easily. It takes less than 2 minutes to go from the card box to the Kit Kat, from the Kit Kat to the card, from the card to the gum packet. It's easy for you to move the gimmick around from thing to thing, but you only get once. So if you actually want to be ready and not have to constantly move the gimmicks from an item to another, you're probably gonna have to spend a little bit more money and procure yourself some extra gimmicks, which are not that hard to acquire, if I'm being honest. And it's probably something that if you're a DIY magician, you probably have loads of already in your possession. Now that's pretty much all I have to say. Let's get into the positives and the negatives. So let's start today with the negatives. What are the negatives of the effect? There is some sound issues with the effect. So if you're in a really like an area with low sound, this is gonna be really loud. It's gonna velcro a lot, if that means something, and it's gonna clack a lot. So it's gonna pack a punch, and it's gonna velcro a lot. That's all I can say about that, and you can clearly hear it. That's why I wasn't even able to put you guys the performance where I performed for myself in this very room, because you would clearly hear every single thing that happens. So I wasn't able to do that. Also, performance limitations is that you have to carry around the perfect sheets of paper, and you're limited to your performing environment. The angles also could be a negative for a lot of people. It's 180 degrees. And that's, can I think of other negatives? I could also think that it's a bit sad they do give you only for one effect the necessary materials, so you can only do one and then have to constantly move around. And another negative I can think of is the Kit Kat. So this small Kit Kat, the gimmick is way too big for the two-piece Kit Kats. It is way too big. Maybe in the US they have bigger versions, but for the ones in Canada, it is way too big for the Kit Kat. So it's basically unperformable. Even on camera, you can see the gimmick from miles away. It is almost unperformable on this with the small Kit Kat of how big the gimmick is. Those are essentially the negatives. Let's get into the positives. What are the positives? It is hyper visual. This snaps and just catches your eye. It looks amazing. And the moment of visualness is incredible. It is also very good for stage, parlor, Zoom shows, and social media. It will work perfectly. It is really good. It is also, the instructions are surprisingly really direct and easy to follow, and they're pretty well shot because the DIY is easy. So the DIY is also super easy. You do get a variety of pamphlets and gimmicks, and it's also pretty easy. I'm just thinking, if you know the concept, you can probably make your own. You won't need these to perform the effect. It is customizable. So if you want to perform it from an actual notebook, I do see you being able to rip the page off a notebook and do it. It is possible to do it on the fly. You will have to do a small preparation that won't be seen, and then boom, you can do it from a notebook. It is very customizable. It's easy to perform the visual part, but a bit hard to perform the giving away part, which I should have added in my negatives. So this is pretty much all I have to say about Midas Touch. I'll give you guys the verdict. So if you want to perform this for a Zoom show or stage and parlor, I do think that this could fit in your repertoire and does have a place if it does interest you. If you're a table hopping magician, this is a little bit annoying for you because this is not a product for you. It is a product that has a lot of limitations, but has a very visual moment. But are those limitations and those kind of, fiddling to give away the object worth the visual aspect? Debatable even for me. I do still think this is a good product, but I do think the limitations are a bit too big. But it does work for my performance and what I want to do with it. But I won't let that overshadow the fact that there are a lot of limitations, a lot of negatives for the product. So I will go out and give Midas Touch a 6.57 out of 10. I do think it's good. It does have limitations, but I do think 6.57 is the best I could give it. And that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching. Next week, we're going to have a review of In Case of Emergency by Adam Wilber. It just came in the mail today. I have yet to look at it, so I'm excited to do that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see everyone in my next video. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.